What if true happiness has nothing to do with pleasure, success, or fame? What if joy is not something you feel, but something you become through how you live? Let's follow Aristotle, not into abstract theories, but into a way of life shaped by virtue and purpose. When most people hear the word happiness, they think of something emotional, a good day, a loving moment, a successful achievement. For many, happiness means pleasure, fun, or comfort. But Aristotle, one of the greatest minds of Western philosophy, saw happiness in a completely different way. To him, happiness, or eudaimonia, was not a passing feeling. It was a way of being, a state of flourishing, a life lived in accordance with the highest version of yourself. Not happiness as mood, but happiness as meaning. Let's go back to ancient Greece. Aristotle was born in 384 BC, a student of Plato and later the teacher of Alexander the Great. Unlike Plato, who focused on ideal forms and spiritual realities, Aristotle was deeply grounded in observation, biology, and practical life. He wasn't just a philosopher. He was a scientist, a thinker, and a guide for how to live well in the real world. In his major work Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle asks the fundamental question: what is the highest good for humans? His answer is clear: happiness. But not the fleeting kind of happiness we chase through comfort or excitement. Instead, he defines happiness as the activity of the soul in accordance with virtue over a complete life. Let's break that down. First, activity of the soul means that happiness is not something passive. It is not something that just happens to you. It is something you do, something you live. It involves thought, action, and intention. Second, in accordance with virtue means that happiness comes from living rightly. Not just doing what feels good, but doing what is good, acting with courage, honesty, generosity, patience. Finally, over a complete life reminds us that happiness is not measured in a moment. It is the story of your whole existence, how you grow, how you endure, how you give. This idea may feel challenging in a world that tells us happiness is quick, consumable, and based on external success. But Aristotle's wisdom is radical because it shifts the center of happiness from what happens around you to how you choose to live. He believed that we all have a function, a purpose that is unique to being human. Just as a knife's purpose is to cut, and a horse's purpose is to run, a human's purpose is to reason and live in accordance with reason. And if we fulfill that purpose well, if we live with reason and virtue, then we flourish. That is true happiness. This view of happiness demands something from us. It is not given, it is cultivated. It is shaped not by luck, but by character, by habit, by the daily choices we make when no one is watching. Do I speak truth when it's hard? Do I act kindly when I feel irritated? Do I work not just for money, but for meaning? In every answer, we are either building or betraying our happiness. Aristotle also distinguished between different kinds of lives. He spoke of the life of pleasure, the life of honor, and the life of contemplation. The life of pleasure chases comfort. The life of honor seeks recognition. But the life of contemplation, the philosophical life, seeks understanding and virtue. And in that life, he believed, lies the highest form of happiness. But this doesn't mean we must become scholars or monks. For Aristotle, philosophy wasn't about escaping life. It was about engaging it more wisely. He believed happiness must involve the full range of human experience: thinking, feeling, working, relating, growing. It must involve relationships, community, education, and even leisure, because in rest, we have time to reflect and realign. Happiness, then, is the result of a life of intention, a life in which you aim not for perfection, but for progress in becoming the best version of yourself. A life where virtue is not a mask you wear in public, but a quiet strength that lives within you even when no one sees. Aristotle invites us to redefine what success means. Not money, not fame, not popularity, but depth, integrity, wisdom. He teaches us that the most fulfilled people are not those who have the most, but those who live most intentionally. And that path, while demanding, is open to all. It doesn't require wealth. It doesn't depend on status. It only asks that you choose virtue again and again until it becomes who you are. For Aristotle, virtue is not a theory. It is a practice, something you build into your character over time. It is not about being perfect. It is about finding the right way to respond to life, through balance, through awareness, through choice. He defined virtue as the mean between two extremes. Courage is the balance between cowardice and recklessness. Generosity is the balance between stinginess and wastefulness. Patience is the balance between apathy and rage. Wisdom is the balance between ignorance and overconfidence. This idea of the golden mean shows us that virtue is not rigid. It is dynamic. It depends on context, intention, and self-knowledge. It requires you to know yourself well enough to say, "This is enough. This is right. This is worth it." Living with virtue is not about following strict rules. It is about learning how to navigate the world with clarity and care. Virtue asks you to bring your full attention into every choice. To ask, is this honest? Is this just? Is this kind? Is this wise? To become virtuous, Aristotle believed, you must practice. Just like a musician practices to play beautifully, or an athlete trains to compete with skill. A virtuous person trains their character. You cannot become courageous by reading about courage. You must face fear and act anyway. You cannot become kind by admiring kindness. You must choose to be kind, again and again, until it becomes your nature. He also emphasized the role of habit. We are what we repeatedly do. He said, excellence is not an act, but a habit. This means that the small choices we make daily matter far more than rare heroic gestures. The way you speak to a friend, the way you react to frustration, the way you spend your time when no one is watching, all of it is shaping who you are becoming. This is both sobering and empowering, because it means that character is not fixed. It is formed, and you have the power to shape it every single day. Virtue, for Aristotle, is the path to freedom. Not freedom as doing whatever you want, but freedom as mastery of self. When you are ruled by fear, anger, laziness, or desire, you are not free. But when you live from virtue, you become steady, clear, and strong. You act with purpose. You respond with wisdom. You live in harmony with your values. Living with virtue also connects us to others. Aristotle believed that friendship is one of the greatest goods in life. But not just any friendship. He spoke of three kinds: friendships of utility, friendships of pleasure, and friendships of virtue. Friendships of utility are based on benefit. Friendships of pleasure are based on enjoyment. But friendships of virtue are based on mutual respect, shared values, and the desire to grow together. These are the rarest, but the most fulfilling, because in them, we are known not for what we offer, but for who we truly are. Virtue is not about being better than others. It is about becoming your best self so that you can contribute to the world with more clarity, compassion, and strength. It is the foundation of a meaningful life, a life that does not collapse under pressure, but rises to meet it, a life that does not follow every impulse, but chooses with wisdom, a life that does not fear struggle, but grows through it. In every moment, virtue gives you a compass, not a map, but a direction, and in that direction, happiness waits, not as a reward, but as a natural result. It is easy to admire virtue from a distance, to read Aristotle and feel inspired, to agree with the idea that happiness comes from character. But real transformation happens only when we bring these ideas into the daily moments of our lives. This is where philosophy stops being abstract and becomes practical, not just something we think about, but something we live. So how do we apply Aristotle's path of virtue in a world filled with distraction, pressure, and confusion? The first step is to slow down. Modern life trains us to rush. We chase deadlines. We scroll past depth. We react before we reflect. But virtue cannot grow in speed. It needs space. When you slow down, you can observe your thoughts. You can notice your impulses. You can ask better questions before you act. When you pause before you speak, you make room for honesty. When you take a breath before reacting, you allow for kindness. When you reflect before deciding, you invite wisdom into the room. The second step is to become aware of your habits. As Aristotle said, we are what we repeatedly do. Our habits shape our character more than we realize. They are the invisible architecture of our lives. So ask yourself, what do I practice every day? Do I practice patience, or irritation, gratitude, or complaint? Do I practice distraction, or focus, fear, or courage? By becoming aware, you can begin to shift, not all at once, but gradually, intentionally. The third step is to define your own standard of success. In a world that constantly pushes external achievement, you must choose to measure your life by something deeper. Success, through the lens of virtue, is not about winning, but about becoming. It is not about how much you have, but how well you live. So create a new scorecard. Ask, did I act with integrity today? Did I treat others with respect? Did I face discomfort with courage? Did I move toward what matters, even when it was hard? The fourth step is to build relationships that support your growth. Virtue is not a solitary journey. Aristotle believed that human beings are political animals. We are meant to live in community, but not just any community. A community that nourishes your better self. Seek friends who challenge you kindly, who remind you of your values, who live what they speak. Avoid those who flatter your ego but neglect your soul. Surround yourself with people who are not perfect, but honest, who are not always agreeable, but real. These are the companions who help you grow. The fifth step is to accept that virtue is a lifelong path. There is no finish line, no moment where you arrive fully complete. Even the wise stumble, even the courageous feel fear, even the kind lose their temper. But the difference is in the return to alignment, the return to purpose, the return to humility. Living with virtue does not mean being flawless. It means being faithful to your deeper self, to your moral compass, to your intention to grow. In applying virtue, you will face resistance. People may not understand your choices. The world may tempt you with easier paths. Your own mind may doubt you. But in those moments, remember, the rewards of virtue are not loud. They are quiet. They are felt in peace of mind, in resilience, in the quiet joy of self-respect, in the ability to sleep at night knowing you lived today as yourself, not someone else. You will not always be praised. You will not always succeed. But you will know the deep, stable happiness Aristotle spoke of. A happiness not based on circumstance, but on character. A happiness that cannot be taken from you, because it lives within you. So start where you are. You do not need a perfect plan. You do not need to wait. Choose one virtue today and practice it. Just for today. Then tomorrow. Again. Slowly. You will build a life that reflects what you value most. And when you look back, you will not see a flawless life, but you will see a life of meaning, a life of truth, a life of quiet greatness. That is what it means to live with virtue. That is what it means to be truly happy. Thank you for joining this journey into the wisdom of Aristotle. In a world that often confuses pleasure with happiness, distraction with freedom, and image with truth, Aristotle offers us something more solid. He reminds us that happiness is not found in what we chase, but in who we choose to become. That joy is not just a feeling, but the result of living well. That our greatest freedom lies not in doing whatever we want, but in mastering how we live. If this message has moved something in you, pause with it, let it speak, let it guide you gently back to your values. And remember, you do not need to be perfect. You only need to be honest, to keep walking toward what is right, to build, day by day, a life that reflects your deepest truths. If you want to keep exploring these timeless ideas with us, follow the Life Philosophy channel. This is where we ask questions that matter. This is where we walk together, toward clarity, toward purpose, and toward the quiet joy of a life lived with virtue. Until next time, stay steady, stay honest, and above all, stay true to who you are becoming.